right. So hello, everyone. If you're here for the State of QA panel, then I'm here to tell you you're in the right place. My name is Rachel Lavallo, and I'm here to moderate today. I'm a senior test engineer at a healthcare tech company called Pulsera, but I've worked in a few roles in quality over the years. But you're not here to hear about me. You're here to meet these folks. So I'd like to introduce our fantastic panelists for today. How we'll approach this is I'll introduce each person and ask a couple of faster questions to get to know them and set the stage for our state of quality discussion. And then we'll step into some deeper questions. And at any point in time, I'd invite you to share questions in the chat as well. And I'll try to pick them up as we go, but we'll also leave some time at the end to really focus in on your questions. So without further ado, let's get started. So first we have Dirk-Jan de Heut, which let me know if I got your last name right. I was going to mispronounce it.
You say it very charming. I'm not sure what you made of it, but I say de Groot. But then we Dutch have the R, the G.
Okay, I will practice. If Bill hadn't gotten it earlier, I would have messed it up terribly.
Just call me Dirk-Jan. Yeah.
Perfect. You are an Agile coach, a published author, and one of the keynote speakers at this year's conference. And I saw in your bio that you're currently working on your next book. So I was hoping that first you could tell us a little bit about the topic of your book and maybe where we can find it if we're interested. And then I'll ask you a question that I want to ask each of our panelists. And that is, what does the state of testing mean to you? And I'm just looking for a few keywords or a quick sentence or two there.
Yeah, well, the good thing is that the bio is outdated, because I'm not currently working on my new book because it's done. It's been published.
Exciting.
Yeah, so that's cool. And it's a funny thing because I'm always struggling with the testing, which is my background, and being the Agile coach. So I thought I'd write a book about value delivery in large organizations and explain what was difficult in value delivering if you scale it up. And most of us are in larger organizations and are dealing with multiple teams. So Agile is not really easy, and how we can do that. And yes, it has some quality issues in it, or aspects like my keynote, which was all about building quality. And recently I interviewed one of the readers who was an Agile tester, and she says, I want every tester to read it. So I was kind of surprised that frequently has become a book which is interesting for testers as well. So I cannot ignore my background, I think. So it's available, and look on my blog, you find some information on it. And on the Twitter, there's a discount code of the Twitter on this conference, because I arranged some discount for this conference. So that's enough about the book. Otherwise, I'm plugging it too much.
No, it's good. It's good to hear about it. So what does the state of testing mean to you?
Yeah, I was thinking, and the first reaction is Joel Montefilaschi. So you were asking for keyword because he's doing the from PractiTest, and he's doing the survey for years now, and I've been involved with that sometimes as reviewer and as promoter of that. So that's the keyword. It's a report for me that's being done every year, which asks a lot of questions and gives some insights. So the second thing, what it means to me, that it's always interesting to take that moment and step back a little bit from the hectic world and the rat race you're in, and start thinking about, hey, what am I doing as a tester, and benchmark that towards other things. So I think it's great. I looked it up just prior to this discussion, since you mentioned that, and I thought, yeah, there are some good questions in there.
Excellent. So both of the parts of your answer kind of lead to the state of testing is kind of, where do I fit within this wider field? And then how can each of us within our testing worlds maybe think bigger via things like this report? That's where my mind goes to. I love to look forward to that each year. But very cool. Thank you so much. All right. We'll move on here. Next, we have Irina Suprun, and Irina is an invited speaker at PNSQC this year. And I hope you caught her fascinating talk yesterday on not your ordinary testing tools. I first heard her speak last year on testing tools that leveraged AI last year. And I'm always fascinated to hear her perspective on what's important in quality, not just the tools, but where the field is going. And I'm not convinced she can't see the future, this has not been proven. But first, congratulations are in order because I noticed that you were recently promoted to Director of Engineering and Quality at Xander. And I'm curious to hear, first, what are you most excited about in your new role? And then I'll ask the same question I'm going to ask everyone, what does the state of testing mean to you?
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be at this conference again. Always good people, always wonderful talks, interesting discussions. So yeah, what I'm excited to make an impact because as one QA or individual contributor, you can do a little bit, but if you in charge basically of testing of the whole company, you can do a lot. It's harder, it takes time, but so I'm excited about challenge and solving current challenges. And if you're talking about state of testing, the first word that came to me when I read your question was like despair.
Despair.
Yes, so that's where I think the testing is right now, because I'm basically losing hope of seeing good software. Recently, maybe it's just me, maybe it's my tester's luck, maybe just because I'm breaking everything I touch, as my husband says. I lost hope to use good software. Recently, like last couple of weeks, I had problems with Turkish Airlines web page, with Bank of America web page, with LinkedIn, and with a bunch of other like, big company software that they have money, they have resources, they have everything, they just don't have will, I believe. So I am a little bit disappointed where we are leading with the quality of software, and I don't know what will be next. I refuse to use like self-driving cars and other stuff.
So, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember being in a meeting years ago and Amazon Alexa was new, and I was in a room full of testers and software developers, and somehow there was a salesperson there who was very excited about this new technology, and all of the testers and software developers were like, no, that's not entering our home. So pretty interesting. But it also sounds like there's an opportunity here. I'm wondering if some of these companies could prioritize quality on a higher level, maybe that would ease a little bit of your despair. I feel like there's more discussion to come on this, but I'll move on for now. We have a couple more people to introduce. So next we have Kartik Iyer, and I've admired Kartik's approach to quality since we both worked at Oracle. And I wouldn't say that we like worked together. I mean that I was the newbie tester and Kartik was the QA manager, defining some really cool processes and approaches to testing that really helped me see how testers had a lot more ability to shape a great high quality product within an agile team. But I see from LinkedIn that you're now on to bigger and better things, Kartik. So I'd like to hear a bit about your day-to-day as a senior QA consultant. And then, of course, a little bit about what the state of testing means to you.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks, Rachel. I know, as you said, it's been like almost like 6-7 years back when I actually worked with you. But it's awesome, and I'm glad to be part of this panel. After Oracle, yes, I've been currently I'm working as a senior QA consultant for a medical imaging device. They basically are working on AI, and so basically working very closely with them. But prior to that, also worked on a couple of contracting projects where I was kind of leading like a QA director, doing like the whole setup for their whole ERP implementation that they were doing and stuff like that. So worked with them for a really long time. I know what the challenges are at this point of time, coming out of Oracle, working with all the contracting big companies, organizations. For me, I think if you ask me what is like what the state of QA at this point of time is, I think, I don't know where everybody is from. I'm actually based out of Canada for the last 10 years. Here, the city where I am, mainly I feel like there is, the word basically is testing as a service. And I see so many companies in here who basically are just specialized, have the people who are doing testing. So basically what happens is like the company who's basically come up with the whole test strategy, test plan, then they kind of leverage it to a company who has like a task, like a testing as a service, who take over and kind of do everything, which I think is, I know it's been going on for some time, but I think it's going to happen a little more. with the way it's going on. And I know, Rachel, you already had some questions about offshoring and stuff like that, which we have seen with bigger companies. But I think there's a lot of companies who are doing this, not only offshoring, within the same city, going with the testing as a service approach, which is very different from my perspective. But yeah, we can talk a little more later on.
Definitely, I'd love to dive into that. So many directions we need to go. I feel like we're going to need more than an hour, but we'll squeeze in as much as we can. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Val Lord. Val and I met through a professional women's Slack group, and right away I was inspired by her experience and perspective on the testing field and career paths within it. She's currently a senior QA manager at Maven Link, but has also, I noticed, worked in product design and also security. So I'm curious how your past experience with product has impacted your approach to quality these days, if at all. And then what does the state of testing mean to you?
Thanks. I'm really happy to be part of the panel today. Well, my past product knowledge, when I got into technology, I got into product design because I have a bit of a design background. And what that really taught me was user empathy. And I wholeheartedly bring that into my testing, and hopefully, I can spread that around so Irina doesn't have a terrible time with all software. But so my QA team is really digs deep into that, and we advocate for the end user at every time we can. The state of testing, when I think about that, I think of sort of almost daily challenging the assumption that we need to automate everything. And we can probably talk more about that, but that's the big one for me.
Definitely. Oh, I'm so excited. So now that we've met each panelist, let's dive into some discussion. I have a handful of questions that I'd like to cover, but also please remember, drop questions in the chat and we'll try to get to those as well. My thought is I'll throw a question out there and direct it to a couple of the panelists, and I'll kind of prompt who answers first, who answers second, to keep us organized when we're working over Zoom like this. But if any panelist also has a perspective, please jump in after that. And I'd really like this to be more of a discussion versus me just throwing questions at each person. So let's jump in right away. And I want to start really generally with how has the pandemic changed testing for better or for worse? And I'm curious to hear maybe first from Dirk-Jan and also from Val on this one.
You want to go, Val?
I can. I just talked, but I'm happy to answer that. So for me, I have something for both sides of that. I found that it was a little more difficult to understand challenges maybe teams were having without being in the room with them. So that's one way it's impacted it, is being remote, is you have to come up with more creative ways to really connect with people and understand sort of the issues they're having. But the other side of that is that I met people like Rachel, and I really kind of reached out of my company, my current network, and expanded my network to talk to new and different people and get different perspectives on testing. So I think, there's pros and cons to how it's gone.
Yeah, I think I relate to that. So things like access to environments are more easily now because you have to access them from your home. So that's being arranged. I think some fake things they're always struggling to get clear are suddenly more documented because they're sent by email and that kind of stuff. So that clarifies things. But the big no-no, I think, is the ad hoc meetings and the interaction. And that's, I think we all recognize that and experience that. It's very hard to have that, I have a question for this guy. Let's approach him. And then you have to book a meeting and everybody's fully booked. and somehow. So whereas you were talking, Val, about automation versus non-automated tests, the real exploratory creative part gets more difficult. But on the other hand, one advantage is, I think, for people working in distributed teams, I experienced where we had the onshore and the offshore, and there was a gap. Suddenly, we were all equal because we're just represented by a small piece of the monitor, and that also made more collaboration easy. So it's a mix of pros and cons, as Val's saying.
Definitely, I'm echoing both of you. It seems like I've also struggled with this strange double-edged sword of really missing those, we used to call them hallway conversations, where it's really a lot less scary to ask somebody a question when you're just leaving a meeting versus saying, all right, I'm going to book a half-hour or hour-long meeting with this person and demand their time. But it seems like in many ways the world is smaller. Like, look at us all in this Zoom right now from all over the world. That's pretty cool.
I think that's a great thing. I saw conference-wise, I saw a lot of local conference becoming international, indeed.
Definitely. It seems like an exciting trend for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that is in the US, but in the Netherlands, things are relaxing a little bit right now. So currently I go to the office more regular, and we're all trying to find a new balance, which seems to be at 2 or 3 days a week, but we're never going back completely. But now we actually have meetings again, physical. I was in France last weekend, and they were much more strict with mouth caps and everything. I wasn't there on work, so I don't know how the office culture is. But there's a big difference between different countries in this respect.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm really curious to just quickly go through the panelists and see what the status of each of your offices is. I know that different areas of the US are very vastly different in terms of safety and how open they are. My company has gone fully remote. So the office the lease is up. We can't go there anymore. There are still some optional in-person gatherings, but that's kind of our status. We've gone very much the other way, which is an interesting adjustment, but curious to hear from others.
And if I may prolong on that, one of my clients now actually brought the external supplier from abroad, got all the people together in a pressure cooker to make things happen. And it's magic what's happening. And they were like, we forgot how that was.
Very cool. Yeah, almost like rediscovering what you can do when you're in the same physical space.
Exactly.
And I think with that intention that you really have to focus on the things at hand, and you aren't going to be just kind of messing around over here because it's just like, oh, we're brought here for a reason, so we better use our time wisely. So
definitely. Anyone else have thoughts on remote work and pandemic life?
I think you asked like what's the status with my company. Yes, my company is similar to yours, where they've said 100% remote, and like, at least for the next few years, looks like. But anyways, so that's there. And somebody did mention in the chat saying like, are you being interrupted more like in chat than the hallway conversation? I actually agree. I think suddenly it's like people just want to ping you and ask like all these questions, and I was like I don't think that was happening a little too much here. But anyways, one thing I guess I had something which I noticed was especially like when it comes to like understanding the requirements, like from a QA perspective, that's kind of the main thing for us, right? A BA or a QA, right? One thing I realized, like with the pandemic, yes, whatever the remote work, at the end of the day, we do miss the whole whiteboard thing and writing it and then doing the whole workflow. That is somewhere like, I mean, yeah, there is options from the laptop, you can do it. But yeah, if I had to say something which is a little negative about it, that's the one thing which I feel, which is I really miss. I think I'm ready. If somebody calls me back to the office, I'll be there.
Yep, that hands-on time. I also miss that. It made for a pretty tight feedback loop with the developers. I actually shared an office with a couple of developers, so it was easy to just turn around and be like, hey, you broke something. Come look at this. So I'd like to step even more general for a moment, if we could. And I'm curious, very open-ended question here, what trend or tool or methodology / area of testing makes you most excited in the quality field from last year? Or if nothing was exciting last year, what are you looking forward to? And I'm curious to hear from Irina and Dirk-Jan on this one.
Yeah, two terms came to mind, and that's CI/CD and BDD. And I love CI/CD as a concept. I think it's a great step forward. Although you might not want to automate all tests as well, but if we get great in that, and if we can make a step in becoming more professional and do at least the big burden in a CI/CD fashion and combine that with development, we make a big step. And so that's for CI/CD.
Yeah, I am excited about AI in testing, as you can guess from my last year talk. So we were lucky and we were able to try one of the tools, like we're rolling it out. And I am surprised how much boring, meticulous task it can handle. It's not like it can handle all the work, but it's a big help, especially in maintenance of test cases, which we all hate. And I'm excited about monitoring and observability, that we pay more and more attention to it as industry, as QAs, that we start understanding that we not only need to deploy and test, but also look and observe and see how our customers use it, how our system behaves in production, and take this knowledge and put it into the testing and expand our test cases or narrow them down so we don't test what nobody is using.
Excellent. Oh, and I do see a question in the chat related to BDD. So Melody asks, why has BDD become more popular lately? It doesn't seem new at all. She's a fan of the general premise of it, especially Three Amigos, she says. So curious to hear more on that.
Yeah, I didn't mention BDD because I wanted to give Irina also some room to respond on that. When writing the book, I was looking for practices and thinking about it, and I came up with the BDD again, which is not new. And thinking about it, it had a lot of advantages. So I actually added it in the core principle section, like we should know about it and we should use it. And then one of my reviewers was saying, why did you put that in the core? Because it's not popular at all. And I had some discussions with people about that, and it's not being adopted big time at all. So to be honest about BDD, I'm not sure whether it's a good idea that nobody picks up, whether it's the promise that will come popular in the coming period, but it seems like a good idea. But why are we not doing it?
Definitely.
That's why it's for me in the rising star category, because I think we should do more of it.
Very cool. Any further thoughts on trends, methodologies, areas of testing? I think both of you brought some really good points up and exciting things. I too am so excited to use more AI tools as well. I've only gotten a chance to dabble so far, but very exciting things on the horizon there too. So both of you brought some good concepts to the table. I'm gonna keep on trucking because I'm feeling like we're not going to get through very many of the questions on the list, but we're making good progress so far. So I'm curious to hear from Kartik and Val about what the biggest challenge currently facing both testers and then also those who manage them might be.
Is that okay? I'll go.
Yeah, jump on in.
Okay. I think I did touch upon it a little bit earlier, and I think it's something that I have noticed with most of the teams that I've worked on, where I think there is this, you just feel like there is some kind of a disconnect, and it's very later on in the release where you kind of realize, hey, like if you look at it, like you can probably have a perfect product if the requirements were like properly analyzed and kind of we actually go ahead and the development is done and the QA is done and everything like that, right? But that is something which is it's becoming a challenge, like more so with the whole remote working environment, I feel. But that's something, yeah, we'll as managers and as leads probably we'll have to continue working on. That's for me, I think that's a big one. I'll see what Val has to say about this.
For me, when I think about this question, one thing that I'm seeing is that we have probably 8 different feature teams, and people are taking the kind of choose your own adventure a little far. So it's really hard to maintain context if you rotate to a different team, like how they do things, and it's pretty disruptive. So my hope and dream is that we can have some like very foundational processes and then sort of make your own a little bit, but not be so far off in the weeds that it's completely unmanageable, because you're dealing with, 5 different testers on 10 different teams, and that's a lot of different kind of information to process. So I'm hoping to reel that in a little bit for my team.
Definitely. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the choose your own adventure, because this is resonating a lot with some experiences that I've had at work. Where does the pain point come up the most when different groups of testers have vastly different processes?
I think it's kind of, if there's an individual tester that supports, our testers support 2 teams each, but there's such a huge context switch for them when they're going to these different teams, different meetings, how they do things. So they're having to have this cognitive load that's double what anybody else on the team is having. Plus they're expected to, it's like, why can't you just be QA for our team? It's like, well, that's not how we do it. And that would be great but that's not how it is. And just the amount of context shifting and information everybody has to have in their brain, I feel like it slows things down, I think, for everybody.
Definitely. That's, such a big loss of efficiency can happen there. And then, I feel like I've been in situations before where that struggle to serve multiple teams effectively, if there isn't that understanding that the person is kind of a shared resource, then the tester struggles to feel successful because, you can do many things, none of them well, kind of that scenario occurs.
I can kind of second on that, because when each team does their own thing with their own way, it's very hard to even introduce common quality standards. So one team can deliver high quality software that never has issues in production, and another team maybe not even have unit tests, but the whole products are complex. They're not built by one team. So when people look at, for example, Turkish Airlines, Bank of America, Xander, they say bad quality, but it's maybe half of the teams. So it's hard when there are no standards, there is no common approach. It's hard to improve quality and make sure that everybody delivers the same quality standards and follows the same quality practices.
Oh, such a good point. So now I am tempted to open this up to everyone, because I'm so curious to hear, Dirk-Jan, from your perspective.
Yeah, triggers.
Being an agile coach, we're talking about more process here. How does that make you feel?
Oh, fine. Because what Irina? Do I say Irina?
Irina, but as long as I recognize it, it's
Irina.
fine.
That's okay. Well, triggered is that it sounds like the context you were talking about are system teams or component teams, and that's very interesting because of course you got different systems, and that team that doesn't introduce any problems in production might have the new easy well-architected system, whereas the other team who does a lot of good testing and work very hard on that happens to have the spaghetti code legacy system, so they cannot help that, having all those problems. So there's a difference in the system and the testing process. But it also triggers me if we look at it from, we don't want to optimize locally, which is an agile coach to say, of course. Then we want to support the whole customer journey and bring that into production. And then standard processes might also mean that we don't lose a lot of time in testing one component when the next shackle in the chain is not tested at all. But also think about a bug triage or something. That if we are in little time and we only want to do the most essential bugs, and we do some chain testing, so the bugs might not be allocated directly to the system, we don't want the one system team to be really detailed and cleaning up the house where the others are working on the major bugs, the real critical ones. And you want to do some balancing of the workload. And then you come towards more feature teams, and code is owned by more people, which is not very easy to do in some organizations. So that's as my 2 cents in reaction on Irina's comment.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I heard somebody jumping in there.
Yeah, I was just saying that, yeah, I agree. And complexity of software and legacy systems and use of it's another story. Something that I say at nights when I go to sleep in my nightmares.
Nice. All right. I have a couple, 3 more questions that I'm really hoping to hit, but time check, we have just over 5 more minutes. So if any of the audience members have a question that's in the back of your mind, now is the time to pop that in the chat. I'll try to get to that as well. Yes. My next question, though, I wanted to touch on this one, and I'm curious to start with your feedback on this one, Kartik, but then we'll probably open it up. I'm curious to hear maybe anyone with a perspectives here's feedback on this one. So what are the current requirements or expectations for those in QA leadership? And actually maybe Kartik and then Irina, because that might be an interesting, QA manager for many years, and then someone who has just stepped into a new manager role might have some different perspectives there. That would be cool.
Sure thing. I think, yes, I mean, it also depends on which company and project that you're working on. For a typical product-based company, which is a big company, yes, we know what the expectation is. You basically are managing a team of people who are kind of working on different Scrum teams and stuff like that. But the other thing that I've noticed when you start working on specifically for business, the QA leadership role is a little different from what we have been used to, where it's more of, it is the expectation for you to basically drive QA from top down, where it's basically you're not in there just going in there and testing and stuff like that. It's basically, you're basically in charge for kind of working with the business folks who basically are going to be there. You are the one who's kind of guiding them with helping them with the tools and stuff like that, getting them access and, setting up the whole test strategy, test plan, everything for them, and kind of guide them for that project to succeed. So that's something which is I'm seeing more often, where it's not just QA coming in, doing the testing or writing the test cases and stuff like that. It's more of driving the whole thing from from the start, from the implementation to actually being delivery of the project.
I hear that for sure. Sometimes it's interesting and a new challenge, but occasionally I feel a bit like a release manager, just sometimes.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I think the shift is more to engineering management. So you are not QA manager or director. It's more engineering, and yeah, it's more QA as a service, because you need to look at the system and make a suggestion, make some policies, some practices, some standards, but there may be no QA in the team, so you're in charge, but you are not in charge. And the biggest challenge, it's for me, for example, that sometimes people looking for easy solution or for magic button or for something if we increase our test automation to a certain level, everything will be fine. And there is none. There is no magic button or one solution that helps.
Great. Thank you so much. So I do see a question in the chat that I'd like to step over to now so that we make sure we prioritize those. And we'll open this one up to anyone with an opinion on this. Melody asks, how successful does this group think driving QA from the bottom up can be or has been in the past?
I think it's very successful up to a certain point.
Ooh, I'm curious to hear more about that. Where is the breaking point?
So I think a lot of innovation comes from the shop floor, so where the people are working. So you should encourage that, and that's where improvements, innovations come. You cannot direct everything top down, but you have to get something in place by the time you hit that glass ceiling where it's difficult to get that innovation spread out and being adopted by the other teams. So you need to have some encouragement for that. So this question aligns greatly with the QA leadership, because they should, on one hand, I think, foster the initiatives from the teams, but create a mechanism to embed that in the larger whole and combine that strategic-wise, or maybe in a chapter structure or something like that, to have groups of people working on that and implement it in different teams.
Great, I love that perspective. Oh, I was
just going to say that I agree, and that, but you do need champions in leadership, so they can help you push your ideas along.
Yes. How do you recognize those champions in leadership? I feel like occasionally that leadership can be intimidating, and how do you know who you can trust and who is going to go to bat for you when the time comes?
That's a tough one. I kind of start any job by like building relationships. So just kind of starting with building relationships with people, and people will emerge who can and will help.
Definitely. So kind of a concept of networking within your company beyond other testers and building those real relationships. That's
exactly
important, I think.
And maybe a hobby a bit. Some of the great innovations I did in the sidelines because I thought it was needed, and I just did it, and then I showed it, and people liked it. So it does not need to distract too much from your work, of course, but there is some room for hobbying if you're interested in that.
Definitely. Oh, well, I see we just hit our time limit, and I don't know where the last almost hour went, but I would just like to say, as we wrap up here, that just because our time limit stops now, don't let the discussion stop. All of these panelists are on LinkedIn, and I would encourage you to go out there and follow them, because I can attest they're all usually involved in interesting projects and discussion there, and are great resources if you want to continue to keep tabs on the pulse of the testing field. So thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you, and they put up with a lot from me. Turns out I'm a poor emailer, but I really appreciate all of them sticking with me and being here today.